And thank you again for coming to our 7th session for flexible and faculty learning opportunities. Today's session is on teamwork. And what we're excited about is continuing this discussion from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. For those of you that have been with us before, this is what guides the work we do in career services. NACE is the leading research-based practices for not only supporting students while they're in 2- and 4-year schools, but also partnering with our career workforce partners. We use this research to forecast and track not only the best salaries and moving into the workforce, but also supporting students and helping them to advocate for themselves and not only getting their first choice jobs, but helping them to move through leadership positions faster than had they not been exposed to these practices. We also look at this research in internships. We advocate for internships where students get paid while they're working with us. We look at it for identifying best practices and benchmarks as well. So if you've been with us this year, we've looked at the first 6 career competencies. Today is the 7th on teamwork, as I mentioned. And then the last one that we'll be looking at the end of April is technology. And the purpose of these, not only as I mentioned, but these, you might think, I understand all of these things. Why do I need to know them as, professional educators? But these really are quote unquote soft skills for what our employers are looking for, no matter what content you teach. So I hope that you will find this discussion useful today. And please feel free to engage with Karen and myself and ask questions as we go along. Whenever we're finished, since this is being recorded, you'll have access to all of these slides. At the bottom of this particular slide is a link to all of the career competencies. We have a statewide organization as well called the Virginia Association of Colleges and Employers that have all of the same information. So in your leisure time, I encourage you to check that out. So let's just jump right in here. Just opening it up for discussion. What is teamwork? And feel free to shout it out.
I would say people working together for a common goal, common purpose.
Great, thank you. Any other ideas? Okay. Do people all have to be doing the same thing at the same time?
No, probably they are doing, they divide the work and working towards the goal, like to piggyback, but like everybody has their own role to play.
Exactly. Right. Well, I chose these 2 photos in particular. These are ideas of, skills or certifications or even degrees that students at Reynolds could learn and could earn at some point in their career. So obviously a crime scene, emergency services, each of those folks, they have very different skill sets, but they're all working toward the same goal, which is rescue and safety of a person in need at a particular time. But the firefighters, their role is very different. Their skill set, their training may be even different from maybe the police that were on scene beforehand, the health professionals where they're driving that person to safety at that later time, but everyone working together toward the same goal. And then on the right, in the courtroom, we see a bailiff on the left. We see either a defendant or actually that's a court reporter. They're in the white shirt. We see the judge. We see maybe a defendant or another person, but then we see an attorney. We see the judge, like I mentioned. Everyone working together, but with a very different and specific role, but perhaps toward the same goal. So teamwork is very important in each of these photos, but without teamwork, we aren't able to accomplish goals. Another 2 photos, and I am kind of going through these, just kind of breaking it down. You all already know these things, but without effective teams, we aren't able to work collaboratively. And that's what our employers stress to me and our employer advisory group on a regular basis. So how about these 2 photos? Any thoughts?
Well, the picture, it looks like it might be in a surgery situation. And again, there's lots of different people that have very different but critical parts
Yes,
in surgery, from the anesthesiologist to a surgeon to the support nurses that are in place, technicians that are in place, perhaps folks from the blood bank that are there. And
exactly.
so the key here is that they all have a very specific role. And I
Mm,
think that's one thing that's important to consider with teams.
exactly. And that's just in this one room. Think about all the people behind the scenes. Think about people after the fact. You mentioned the support roles. Think about our custodial teams, our facility teams, our food service teams. You know, everyone has a role to play in this case, taking care of this patient. The one on the right, any thoughts on that one? We see one employee helping a customer. Is that teamwork?
There's a part of me that says yes, because you want to make sure that this employee at the bank is staying on brand. And
Yeah,
so kind of having a sense of what is expected from the team at the organization and how that comes out, you know, in terms of assisting customers is key.
exactly. Any other thoughts? So I chose this image on purpose because even though it's just an image of one employee, no one is ever working in isolation. So you mentioned on brand. This gentleman has on a name tag. Like, if you could see me now, I'm wearing my Reynolds name tag. He's standing in front of the name of his bank. He's wearing, it looks like his corporate logo on his sweater, representing the bank as an extension of the team. However, unless he's the president of the bank or the owner of the bank, he had to have been trained by someone. He's part of a collaborative team, maybe someone with similar titles working together. Maybe he manages people underneath him. No, like I said, no one works in isolation. So we can talk about what those team skills are, because that's, again, what our employers are stressing, is they don't want people who are completely independent to the point where they cannot work collectively as a group. That's something that has changed dramatically between our generations, between the Gen X's, the Gen Z's, the millennials also, is that, you know, stressing teamwork, stressing collaboration. As we see with our students, this is something that we need to stress. And Karen, you may get to that also. So, couple thoughts. True or false? Let's think on this for just a minute. The first one, a strong team has one leader and dictates all tasks to subordinates.
False.
False.
Okay. Okay, so both of you said false. Can you think of a team where that may have been true or that still might be true?
It is true in some instances, yes.
Okay. Okay, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Maybe a military leader, a
Yes,
commander.
yes, right. That's kind of where I was hoping you'd go, because in most cases now, you know, most professions, this is not the case. You're exactly right. But there are still some where this has to be true. In cases of like national security or the military, then yes, that is true. But for the majority of our professions, we have teams of teams. And look, I just gave that one away. Teams of teams. And you can reflect on your own professional journey. Here at the college, do we have teams of teams?
Of course, certainly.
Absolutely.
And as you're preparing your students to go out into the workforce or preparing for transfer, that's most likely the field that they will be going into. Again, whether it's trades, whether it's, STEM or humanities, whatever type of field they're going into, they will most likely go into an environment that is set up like this, teams of teams. That is what is research is saying is the most productive. Like I said, unless it's some type of military or very regimented establishment, the police is probably the most closely related, where you have, a chief and then lieutenants and captains, and then it goes down from there. But you still have, teams of teams within that. Now, how about the last one? An effective team uses communication and collaboration to accomplish tasks. True or false?
I said true. I was muted.
True.
Yes. Yes. So even back to the photos that we saw before, absolutely. You can probably think of what the alternative might look like. But yes, to be an effective team, you have to use your words. That can go also with verbal communication. You have to, I don't mean to be facetious, but definitely use your words. You have to clearly articulate what your expectations are. You have to, communicate clearly and often. And then you also have to be able to work with others. That's what being a team is a part of. And you know this, obviously, but that's, again, what our employers will be looking for in the future. And Dr. Davis, I saw you just tune in here. Did you want to contribute? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you
Let
on
me
the-
read really quickly.
I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean to
I will let this one continue, and then
Okay.
I'll go to the next one.
Okay. We just have a few more here. So the benefit of cross-functional teams is that they can leverage diverse skills, knowledge, and insights to create innovative solutions and improve processes. What are your thoughts on that? True or false?
True.
True.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so the image I showed you before of the firefighters and the rescue people, that's a perfect example of a cross-functional team. Again, in the hospital operating room, cross-functional teams. Can you think of any cross-functional teams we have here at the college?
All are achieving the dream work.
Yes. Yes, you're right. The strategic direction. Great. Okay, and then the next one. So how about this last one? What are your thoughts? Any ideas?
I can say yes, but you're saying all teams, so okay.
I would
Yeah.
say all effective teams.
Okay, yeah. So all teams sounds like little yeah, Miss
Yeah. It sounds very absolute, and maybe they should have teams.
I would say that we've all likely been on a team that did not keep track of due dates or budgets or communication.
Heck yeah.
So you
And I
got,
don't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say, you got me. I purposely kept that word out. Because all teams don't have that, but maybe all teams should, or all effective teams, you're right. But we've all probably experienced teams that don't have those things. And when you don't have a team leader, then you have something else entirely. So we could probably add to that list. And as professionals, we know what it looks like to be on an effective team. And then we also probably have some experience with an ineffective team. So as you're working with your students, do you all ever share these types of things so that perhaps they can learn?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think the key is thinking about how you can provide different roles to students. You can talk about common pitfalls that you see in the types of group work that you might have in your classes. And we'll talk about more of that in a little bit.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you all for working with that with me. Has anyone ever heard of a dysfunctional team or the 5 dysfunctions of a team? Okay, so I see some head nods. Okay. So there's a very famous author named Patrick Lencioni, very well known in the education space. So Dr. Davis, I saw you nodding your head. Not to put you on the spot, but I'm not. Look, she's like, again, I'm not going to nod ever. That's okay. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. I'll
You
ask them.
want me to name one of them?
Ooh, well, listen.
Is that what you're asking? I'm sorry. Ask your question before I give my answer.
That's okay. That's okay. You know, that's all right. I don't want to put you on the spot.
We had to read it as a dean team, so that's why I nodded my head. I'm familiar with it.
Okay. Well, then I'll ask the rest of the group. So for the rest of the group, what do you think is the most important aspect of a team in order to function?
Collaboration.
I'm sorry?
Collaboration.
Okay, good. That's a great idea. Very important, but it's like the foundation for you to be working together with your team. In order to have this, then you can build upon the rest of the building blocks.
Team spirit, I think.
Oh, I like that. As an enthusiastic person, I definitely like it. But this is where, you were to, if someone confided in you and they wanted to share information with you that was very important about the team or the organization, and I feel like I'm on the $25,000 pyramid. Y'all remember that? And so it's trust. Trust. That is the most important thing at the bottom. Without trust, a team cannot function. And
Correct.
trust goes into believing in each other, sharing information with each other in a vulnerable space, knowing that your teammate has your back, knowing that you can help carry each other's weight. If, they need you to kind of pick up the slack, then you'll do it, and vice versa. That you'll be there for each other. Whenever it comes to finishing tasks, like I said, you'll be there for each other, not only professionally, but personally. The next function of a team, the one that goes right above that, does anyone have any ideas for what could be right above trust? What would be the next most important thing?
Can we get a lifeline?
Maybe I can help with a hint.
Sure.
It's now that you've established trust and possibly even camaraderie, even friendship, it's what you don't want to do. So
Right.
you may avoid it.
Yeah.
That didn't help?
There you go.
Yeah.
So once you have established this trust, and not saying like a family, but you have this work family, that you are breaking bread, you have this foundation, you are able to resolve conflict, because in the workplace, it happens all the time. But if you don't have that foundation built and conflict erupts, then you can't get back to that place of working together in a functional way. What's going to happen to that conflict if you don't have that trust?
People can either avoid it, they can avoid conflict, or it can be a toxic environment
Yes.
of people airing out things.
Yes. That
And then, of
bitter-
course, it breaks down the trust.
yeah, yeah, that bitter pill is gonna grow, it's gonna fester. In a large organization, it can lead to attrition, high staff turnover, lack of productivity. We could look and see what's happening to the employment market. And that's why this research is so important. You can break it down to these 5 simple areas. The next one, once these 2 are well established and it's really embedded there, and once it goes without saying that the top leadership have to commit to this, but then all of your employees, you commit as a team. And it isn't just like on a 1-day retreat each year, like rah rah, I'm going to do it. You have to commit over and over again. And it's, monthly, weekly, daily. I said before, your team of teams, it's everyone all day, all the time. Not to the point where it's a cult by any means, but you're not drinking the Kool-Aid here. It's you believe in the mission, you're about the culture, you want to be a part of it, you are fueled by the work that you do, you're in that trust, you're a part of this triangle here. Not to say, again, like you still have that healthy work-life balance, but again, you want to be accountable. So because you are a part of the mission, everyone is held accountable. And if these things aren't happening, then like we said before, if people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, then if one person isn't held accountable, then there isn't the buy-in from everyone in the group. And then the whole purpose, the entire mission, are results. Whatever the organization is, you can look around Richmond right now, see what's happening. I'll just use the Diamond District as an example. That project has been in the works for years, if you followed any of that. I mean, years. And now we're at the point finally where the drawings are done, or the drawings are a product. It's actually happening. They're building the new diamond. But if people weren't committed to that, if the trust wasn't there, and that takes, buy-in from the community, buy-in from all of our employers, then people would have fallen off along the way. But the dysfunctions. So I said all the good stuff. But the 5 dysfunctions, if you don't have any of those from the jump, then you get these things on the left. So like if any one of them aren't working at any time, this is what you have. Bless you. And the reason why I'm talking about it today is the earlier your students can understand this, the better. Because high functioning organizations believe in this. It isn't just us, or like on Dr. Davis said, the dean team, and we can read books, we can practice these things for a short time. And I'm not saying y'all are practicing for a short time, but like I said, high functioning organizations, they believe this, they do it. It's a part of their culture. And we want your students to graduate and go out and be a part of a high functioning team, whatever team they decide to do. Like, again, back to the Diamond District, if you're seeing what's happening with the CoStar group, again, just across the river, they are growing at an exponential rate for people in almost every profession that we prepare students for. They're high functioning, not dysfunctioning.
And Laura, I just want to chime in here that this is something that we as faculty can keep in mind as we design teamwork or group work projects. Think about ways that we can start with building trust within a group, and then think about how we can help them hold each other accountable as part of the work that they do. And again, focus on that final product.
Exactly. Exactly. Any questions about this image? Okay. So these are the sample behaviors provided by NACE. And you all can read those. I don't want to read them to you. But any questions or anything that stands out to you?
One thing that I think is key is the piece about compromise. I know commonly one of the things that I will see among students that are doing group work in my courses is that there's that tendency to say, this is the way I want to do it. I'm not going to change. I'm doing these slides. This is my part of the project. And there's a part that says, I'm glad that you want to take that level of ownership over a portion of the project, but there's also that piece of other people might have ideas to contribute or good images to include on a slide, and you don't need to edit somebody else's work away, as I've seen in some cases. So that idea of being able to listen to others, but then also compromise and be willing to work within the group is key.
I think that's important.
Something it was two things that stood out to me. Yeah, I'll just say that. And one of those was listen, kind of seek to understand, take your time to understand, ask questions without interrupting. And I think so often there's so much interruption going on all the time. Like, I got your first point. I've already developed what I'm going to respond with. I don't even let you finish. Agree or disagree. There's just seems to be a lot of interruption, which can be very frustrating. Especially sometimes I can speak really quickly, and then sometimes it takes me a minute to process. And because some people are used to me speaking really quickly and thinking really quickly, I don't always get the time to do my process to get something out, and it can shut me down. And I think some people don't realize the effect that an interruption can have on not just the statement being made, but the person themselves. The other thing that really stood out to me was the being accountable, not just for yourself, but for the team. And speaking with that team talk. We delivered, we were responsible for, which doesn't always happen. It can be a we when positive comes out, but oftentimes it's singular proper nouns when it's not the intention as the result. So I really like that whole being accountable for individual and team responsibilities and deliverables.
Well, thank you for mentioning those, especially about the active listening. During one of the other competencies for communication, we really stressed that too, about the active listening and how much of a challenge that is, believe it or not, for people, being over talked. And then, like you said, responding before you've even had a chance to finish. I mean, it's a skill, honestly, that you have to model and teach people how to do. So thank you for recognizing that. Any other thoughts?
I did want to add something. As far as, some of the classes that I teach are legal classes. And one of the things like you have here is like the students working together. We do recognize the concept of, the students wanting to work alone and, being independent. But in the workforce, especially in law firms, there's a lot of working together. And so this is a space where I actually have had to adjust myself from being in a space where students are like, well, I just want to do it myself, to having them understand that I understand that you want to do it yourself, but in this field, we do a lot of working together. So I actually need you to learn the concept of teamwork and why, because we're in a space where someone's probably done it before. And this is how you practice working smarter and not harder. And so it's a learning experience for them. And it's been a very big learning experience for me in teaching the students that this is exactly why it's important, because you get together and then you realize that, maybe you have a student who's never done anything with social media. Maybe you have someone who's never used PowerPoint. And then you get into that group and they're like, oh my gosh, I was able to contribute this part. And that other student was able to do the PowerPoint and added video links and and made it amazing. And then suddenly the thing that they thought was going to be the worst thing becomes the best thing.
Love that.
I'll piggyback off of that. I gave a project last semester, and I had the same issue where one of our most highlighted criminal justice students came in and expressed herself very thoroughly, that she did not do group projects. She wasn't gonna do group projects. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation, she thought. Then I asked her, I said, well, if you're gonna work in the criminal justice field, then I guess you're gonna get fired at every job that you apply for, because there's not one that you don't have to work with somebody. And you're not gonna have all the skills to be able to get the job done. So she did the project, and her project turned out really great. Like her group mates had skills that she did not possess. So I think it was like a mind opening experience for her, to let her know, like, hey, yeah, I'm good in areas where I put myself in and function at, but when I'm put into places uncomfortable, I might not be so great. So I might have to rely on other people.
Well, how about that?
I can add to the same thing, like, yeah, well, my students, like, many of them email me, like, I never worked in a team. I never worked in a group project. I don't like group projects. I don't want to do, I'll submit my work. I said, well, working in the team is part of your group project. So I made them do that. So, and especially like I can speak for accounting, and it's a team. It's like not one person is doing, because segregation of duty is so important in accounting. So they must be working in teams.
Excellent. Thank you
So,
all for sharing.
I want to piggyback one comment here. I think all of us as faculty have encountered the students that are resistant to group work because they don't want their grade to be dependent on other people.
Right. Yeah.
And so this goes back to what we're saying here about the whole team needs to be accountable, right? But as an aside, the equity reading group on campus this semester is reading a book called Grading for Equity. And in the book, the author talks about, with group work activities, you do them, but you don't actually grade the group. You grade the individuals after they have put together a final product. And so the idea is that the individuals would be working on kind of highlighting the lessons learned from the product or the major outcomes from the product, but the product itself is not graded. And I'm still sitting with that as a faculty member of, like, how do you not grade the project? But we're going to be discussing a little bit tomorrow, and I want to research this a little bit further, and I hope to bring some more of that to discussion, perhaps at the faculty forum in a couple weeks. So,
Can I piggyback off of that? I think I never heard of that, but I think what they're referring to is, like when you look at a project, you might know that if there's 4 people in a group, only 3 of them did it. There was only 3 engaged with you as the professor, asking you questions, asking you understanding. I know for my project, when they had meetings, I would pop in and out of the meetings. I might not stay the whole time because I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable, but I would pop in and out just to see who showed up, who did what. Or I would just send like random emails and ask questions. And I noticed by doing that, I could kind of verify whether you knew what you were submitting and what you were working on and doing. And so I graded the students based off of those things, like those.
and I've had situations where the students grade each other, right? Or they provide some sort of feedback too. So there's ways to get at it. But one of the things that, again, I'm sort of getting into is this idea of how we make sure that we're grading outcomes and not behaviors. But that's a whole nother discussion we'll talk about shortly.
Well, just a quick final note on that. Think about teamwork as it goes into the workplace. Remember, that's the highest point on that pyramid, are the results. So the more that you all can practice that here at the safe, quote unquote, college level, the more preparation you can do and say that this does have a greater impact than when you graduate and you go on to your jobs. That everyone should be contributing at the same level. Even though it's uncomfortable, this is the safe place to do it. Okay, well, thank you. Just a quick thing. I don't know about you all, but coming up through school and, the way that we collaborated as teams has changed a little bit. So has anyone used Asana? Okay, I'm seeing some heads shaking. Wish you could see my head shaking now too, but yes. So a lot of corporations are using Asana or other web-based platforms for monitoring team progress. This is an example. So for so many of our future employees or candidates going out into the workplace, people working at home. So your progress on tasks is kept in an online platform. This is an example. So Draymond, to like what you were saying, you don't want to, hop into Zoom meetings or whatever, you're trusting your students to what they're doing, but this is a way for managers or directors or what have you to kind of keep tabs on people. And so there's a lot of trust going back to the bottom level of that pyramid that people are doing what is expected of them. And then remember our team of teams. So this is a way for people to be working independently. They're just keeping all of their tasks in this online database. So this is what our current employers and our advisory board use, like in our large corporations. For example, Bank of America is one of our partners. They use this type of thing. And then there are other various platforms, but this is something that if you aren't familiar with Asana, I would encourage you to check it out. We've seen this before. I want to finish up here to give Karen some time. I'm sorry, I've gone a little long. But in general, employers are looking for the skills we've talked about before. Teamwork is definitely one of them. Same types of thing, taking initiative, leading by example, character integrity, helping others, selfless, self-advocacy. And now I'll turn it over to Karen. Thanks so much.
So when I was approaching this, I was thinking about how we do teamwork, and I think that most faculty do some sort of team activity. There are some courses that might lend themselves to group work more than others. For example, in my science labs, it's naturally sort of baked in to how the course is taught. But one of the things I wanted to think about today is different modalities that we teach in and how group work might look in some of those different spaces. So first, I just wanted to talk about some things that are sort of best practices for group work design, regardless of your modality. And on the very first one, it's this idea of determining what are your instructional goals. Certainly from a faculty perspective, we want to think about what are the learning outcomes that we're trying to achieve by assigning whatever work is being done by the students. But then we also want to think about, are there some sort of social skills, soft skills, some of this sort of idea of collaboration and communication that we're fundamentally building into that experience as well? One of the things that's interesting to me is the concept that, again, when we grade students, the idea is that we want to be very careful. Generally speaking, we don't want to be grading them on their behaviors, but rather the learning outcomes. So what I mean by that is, we don't want to necessarily grade students on how they're communicating with their group unless that's a learning outcome for your course. But the idea of having some of those social components might be beneficial as sort of a subcategory, so to speak. I think it's important that we define those benefits of teamwork for our students. And it sounds like many of our faculty are doing that, talking about you're not getting that job if you don't have these skills. And so I think that if we continue to reinforce that across the curriculum as much as we can, that is ideal for our students as well. As you develop assignments that are using group work, I think it's essential that you define those learning objectives that you're trying to meet and what those deliverables are going to be. Again, sometimes we just say, make a presentation, but again, the key is in what format, how much flexibility are you giving students? Are you asking for the inclusion of social media components, PowerPoint components, video versus still information, etc.? And being very clear about that means of assessment. And so this is again where there's this interesting question of, is it a group grade or should it be individualistic? And again, some of the most recent research I'm reading about is suggesting that individual grades are ideal, but the idea is that they're reporting out on the results of their group product. In terms of working within groups, I think it's quite successful if you can define roles for students. I think because our students are new or resistant to this work in many cases, there's a tendency for dominant personalities to sort of take control of the group. And so I think it's key to perhaps define some different roles within these groups. So whether it's an in-class discussion or a larger project, if you could have those who are maybe reporting time out, basically a timekeeper or your time management person to say, hey, are we meeting the deadlines for the assignment? If it's been scaffolded with deadlines, equity monitors for discussions, that's just someone who is there to make sure that you hear from everybody in the group. But you can also have that in a longer term project as well. Has everyone contributed? And somebody's keeping track of that and willing to nudge their classmates if they're not making those steps towards participation. Another way to approach this is thinking about different stakeholder perspectives. So for example, we saw the picture from the medical environment, and we have all of the different types of doctors, nurses, support staff that would be contributing to that environment. So thinking about creating assignments that factor in various perspectives for students to adopt as they move through that group work. So the key here is that there's lots of different ways you can design that assessment. Next slide, please. Other things to consider in terms of best practices that are in educational research is really considering your group size. According to most things that I can find, a group size of about 4 to 5 is ideal. And I would say that's probably true given what I have seen in lab settings. I would actually argue probably 3 to 4. Sometimes odd numbers are better though, because then you can break ties in groups. Another key thing, the introductions matter when you work in groups. As we all pointed out, many of our students are kind of working in isolation. And even if we're doing this in an online setting versus in class, it floors me every semester when I have students who have been sitting next to each other for 10 weeks and they still don't know each other's names. And so it's that piece of making sure that those introductions matter, because this relates back to what Laura was talking about, the base of our pyramid. If you start to introduce yourselves to each other, start to create relationship, that's what starts to build trust. And so just kind of setting that foundational moment is key, and you can build that into the assessment or the assignment that you're creating. Another key component of any sort of group work should include some sort of norm setting discussion. So again, this is some time that you're setting aside, whether for the students to discuss in a discussion board or perhaps face-to-face in an online situation or in breakout rooms on Zoom. But the key is that they need to talk about how they're going to communicate with each other, because this also will then help them with that resolution of conflict and other situations later. And so it's also good to model for them and provide them with some guidelines for professional and inclusive conduct. And those are available in various teaching centers online. And if you have questions on that, CETL can help provide that for you. The other key thing I think for any group work assignment is providing structured time for students to work on this. Again, that's a little bit harder in an asynchronous modality, but if you have any specific times where you are meeting with students in face-to-face classes, even just giving them 10 minutes to get together, talk about the work, it will help in the long run. Again, if you are working asynchronously, even if you set up an office hour time frame where groups can come speak to you individually, that's also another way to kind of help that move things along. And then on the backside of the assignment, I think it's always great to have this opportunity for student reflection on the experience. One, this is going to perhaps help you with your grading of it. So like we said, we can have that peer feedback aspect, but then there's also the idea of letting students think about, what did I learn from being in this environment? So those of you who had students who realized that, hey, I learned something about how to use social media or to use video capture in a new way, I think it's great for them to really reflect on, not only did I just learn about paralegal studies, but I also learned about this aspect of using technology. Next slide. A couple of other things to think about when you're doing face-to-face group work is the physical space. One of the things that can be challenging in a classroom environment sometimes is allowing the students to sort of reorganize themselves into groups. Many of our teaching areas actually have our seats on wheels, and so that's good. But you always want to think about too, does it allow for that movement for the groups to move into these different spaces? And be mindful of the volume of discussion. Many students may not recognize how that interaction can play out, particularly if we have students in the space that have hearing disabilities. So you just want to make sure that you're providing enough space and not having students kind of cramped on top of one another if you're having lots of group activity and active discussion. When we think about online considerations, once again, there's this idea of creating virtual spaces for interactions to occur, and this can be good for both synchronous and asynchronous classes. I have found most success here at Reynolds using the Google suite of tools for group work interactively, simply because it's something that they all have access to through their My Reynolds accounts, and they don't have to sign up for extra apps or anything like that in order to work. So again, it's helpful many times for you to set up the files, because then you can essentially monitor from the background, or you can have students add you as a member to their working group. But again, I find that if you are able to set up a PowerPoint, for example, for them in Google Slides, and then let them fill in as they go, it's successful because then you already have access to their file for grading purposes as well. Another thing that I know many student groups are using on campus too is Discord. Now, this is a separate app that many of them use. They download it to their phones, but it's a way for them to create collaborative groups. Basically, they can text each other without having to share all of their personal information and phone numbers. So it's just another way that students are interacting. Now, I did reach out to some of our faculty that are teaching in high flex environments, and many of them said that right now they do maybe some group work or group interactions for the synchronous components of the class. So maybe students that are in the classroom are working together and the students on Zoom are working together, but there's still this sort of missing experience for the asynchronous students. And so I was wondering, do we have any faculty on the call today that are doing high flex group work? And if so, how are you setting that up?
Yeah, so I have my business course that is high flex. And I mean, honestly, I just started from the beginning. And I think that's important, because I think it would have been different if I would have done a group assignment or 4 weeks in versus week one, because I feel like doing it week one kind of let them know what to expect, what could happen in this class. And so I also told them, make sure you bring your laptops to class. And I mean, I feel like for me, it wasn't an issue because I kind of already set them up to make sure you bring your laptop, and we may do group work. And when I first did it, I said, wait a minute, hold on. I don't think I thought about this, but I said, you know what? Nope. We're going to do, we did what do you call it? The different rooms.
Breakout rooms.
I did breakout rooms, and I was downtown, and I said, you know what? I had already checked across the hall. The conference room was open. I did 4 breakout rooms, and I said, 2 of you go to that conference room, the 2 groups, and 2 of you stay in the classroom. And each group, luckily, and I separated it so that all of the people that were on Zoom there was like 1 or 2 people in each of the groups that were also in the classroom. So it wasn't like Zoom and, all Zoom and then all in person. Because in order for them to feel like together, I need you to be in here with the people that are in class. And they just made sure they included, everybody. And so and the only other thing that I did was make sure you all pick one person to speak to the class. And that could be the person on the line, because who's to say the person online that's at home, that may just be the person who's just, they like to talk.
Yeah.
And so I left that up to the group, and it worked out great.
Awesome. I love that. Because again, it's that key that I still feel like we're all sort of learning the high flex environment and what works. And so I think that this is a great example of how we can use that way to engage both the online learners as well as the seated students. Go ahead and advance the next slide for me, Laura. Thanks. Just one other comment I wanted to make is thinking about faculty-student teamwork outside of the classroom. And one of the things that I want to emphasize is that students are part of our Reynolds team, right? And so it's always a great opportunity to encourage them to participate in different activities that we have here at the college. One of the things that we've seen a lot of faculty doing well is having students participate in open house events or other activities, whether they're in a student group, or here on the slide, we have a picture of a physics student helping out at STEM Fest. So Dr. Oshab, who's one of our physics professors here at the college, he does a great job every semester recruiting students from his classes to just participate in this event. And so it's another way to encourage teamwork, because the students get together and set up different experiments for STEM Fest night. And so I just love that as a different example of student-related teamwork. Also, I would reach out to faculty here and say, you might consider advising a student club within your discipline. I know that Dr. Cowman in Student Life is looking to increase the number of academic-related clubs here on campus. And so that would be a great way within your discipline to emphasize some of these different NACE competencies in a different way. So just, again, think about all the different ways that you can share this idea of teamwork. We've done lots of discussion here, and I want to be mindful of time. So thank you all for attending. Laura, do you have any final thoughts for us?
No, other than I got my video to work, so all I did was open my laptop. Not that you cared, but thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate Esbit showing up. Thank you. Whoop, whoop. We hope that you will join us for our last session, April 22nd. That's going to be on technology. And since you have been so supportive of us, we will love to give you a shout out to everyone. Our newsletter is coming out, Career Services, on Monday. We have an open house for the Career Center, April 3rd, and then our hiring fair is April 18th. So please spread the word for all of that to your students. We want to get as many students as possible gainfully employed, and we'd love to spread the good word of Career Services. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
And one last thing, I just dropped in the chat an evaluation form for this particular session. So if you have a few minutes, give us some feedback, and you'll probably get an email about that again tomorrow. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Asbit.
Woo woo.
Thank you, host.